Alright guys, here's our review for the next test. Our first method here is plurality, okay, and that is just counting the most first place votes. So most first place votes here is 18, whoops, and that is our plurality winner. Okay. Now as we move to board account, I have to extend the page here a little bit, and I'm going to try and keep everything in the screen. It goes something like this. So P has 18 first place votes, has 0 second place votes, has 0 third place votes, has 0 fourth place votes, and it has 37 fifth place votes. So hopefully everyone can kind of see my count there, and I'm going to try and put this into numbers or a font size that will all fit. There we go, that's a little bit better. Alright, and my total here is going to be 203. With Coke, or the C, it's going to be 12 first place votes, 14 second place votes, 0 third place votes, 11 fourth place votes, and 18 fifth place votes. And that totals 174. For M, which is actually Mountain Dew, it's 10 first place votes, 11 second place votes, 0 third place votes, 34 fourth place votes, and 0 fifth place votes. And our M score would be 168. For S, 9 first place votes, 18 second place votes, 18 third place votes, 10 fourth place votes, and 0 fifth place votes. And that scores 139. And finally the D, which is Dr. Pepper, 6 first place votes, 12 second place votes, 37 third place votes, 0 fourth place, and 0 fifth place votes. And that winner, or that total, is 141. So my board account is right here. Okay, and my winner is once again my lowest score. So it's going to be S with a score of 139. That's plurality in board account. Now, as we move on to the runoff and runoff with elimination methods, okay, we're going to start with our runoff method. And runoff is simply this. We take the top 2 first place vote getters, and then we cross everything else out. So S goes, D goes, and M. S, D, M. S, D, and M. S, D, and M. S, D, and M. S, D, and M. And now I need to redistribute the vote. And this one actually works out pretty simply, because the column with 10 goes to C, the column with 9 goes to C, the column with 4 goes to C, and the column with 2 goes to C. And therefore, we get a total of 37. So our runoff winner is C with a total of 37. Runoff with elimination. Now, we take all the first place votes. P at 18. This one we're going to have to make a little bit smaller. So P at 18, C at 12, M at 10, S at 9, and we need to combine those last 2 columns. D has 6. But once again, D still has the fewest first place votes, so D gets eliminated. So we're going one at a time now. So all the D's get eliminated, and now I redistribute that vote. C gets 4 votes, and M gets 2 votes. So now C is at 16, M is at 12. So now I get rid of the S. Because S has the fewest first place votes. S goes, S goes, S goes, S goes, S goes, and S goes. Okay. So now those 9 votes that get taken from S, they go to M. So now M is at 21. And now C has the fewest first place votes now. So we eliminate C, 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 and we eliminate C. And now M gets those 12 votes. So M gets those 12 votes, and that's 33 votes. Because the, oops, get rid of here, the C gets eliminated. So now my winner by runoff with elimination is simply M with the score of 33. Okay. Now pairwise comparison. What I'm going to have to do here is see if I can make this a little bit smaller so I can fit everything in the one screen. Do this, and do this, perfect. So we're here. Ooh. That up. Move this down. There we go. So we're in the screen. Okay, so essentially we're doing each pairing. So P versus C. P, obviously, make this a little bit smaller here. Make sure we get the right font here. Okay. So P versus C, P loses to C. P loses to M. P loses to S. Oops. And P loses to D. Okay, and if you notice, P gets 18 votes in the first column, but P loses to literally every other option in every other column. So every option ends up with 12 plus 10 plus 9, that's 31, 5, 35, and 2, ends up with 37 votes. So basically, C versus P, C gets 37 votes. M versus P, M gets 37 votes. S gets 37 votes. D gets 37 votes, and that's it. Now, if you look at it, there are 55 total votes. So you need 28 votes to win. Okay. So obviously P only gets 18 each time, so it loses. So therefore, it's going to put W's in this column. Now we do C versus M. M wins the first column, C wins the 12 second column votes, M wins the third, M wins the fourth, C wins the fifth column, M wins the sixth. So C only gets 16 votes. So it loses, and therefore M wins. Now C versus S. C wins the second column, C wins the third column, and C wins the fifth column. 12, 10, and 4 is 26. That unfortunately is not 28, so C loses to S. S wins against C. C versus D. C wins the second column, C wins the third column, but that's it. It only gets 22 votes. So therefore, it loses to D, and therefore, D is a winner. Now we're doing M versus S. S wins the first column, S wins the second column. That's 30 votes. S has already won. So M loses to S. And the same thing happens here. D wins the first two columns. M loses the first two columns. So D already has 30 votes. That's it. So M loses to D, and D beats M. And then finally, S versus D. S wins the first column, and S wins the fourth column. But D wins the second, third, fifth, and sixth columns. So S ends up with 27 votes, and D ends up with, I think, 28 votes. So therefore S loses and D wins. So therefore our winner by pairwise comparison is D with a record of 4-0. Remember, to win by a record of 4-0, or to win by pairwise comparison, you need to be undefeated. All right. Now this is a vote where we have individual votes, and we're going to be doing pairwise comparison, but we have each individual vote as one vote. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so we can kind of fit it all in. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so I can fit this in. All right, bring this up here. We can bring this hopefully down here. Okay, so essentially what we're doing here is we're going by column. Each column is one vote. So there are 15 votes here, and you need 8 votes to win. So you have a majority. So if I do P versus C, if you look at the first column, P beats C, so that's 1 vote. C wins here. P wins, that's 2. C wins. P wins, that's 3. P wins, that's 4. C. P wins, that's 5. C wins. C wins. C wins. C wins. P wins, that's 6. And then C wins. So in this case, P loses to C. So in this case, P loses to C. Notice it's 15 votes, and I'm just dealing with the 2 letters at once. I'm not dealing with anyone else. So now P versus M. P wins the first column. M wins the next 2. P wins the 4th column, the 5th column. So now it's at 3. M wins, M wins, M wins. P wins the next column, that's 4. M wins. P wins the next column, that's 5. M wins. M wins. P wins the next column, that's 6. And then M wins. So that means P loses to M. M beats P. Now P versus S. 1 loses. 2 loses. 3 loses. 4, 5, 6 loses. 7. P loses here as well. S wins. And now D. P wins the first one, loses second, loses third, fourth, loses fifth, sixth, lose, 7, and then it loses. So it actually loses every one of these. And now I go through C. And what you'll notice is C is going to beat everyone, doing the same process. When M competes, M only loses to C, but M actually beats S and D. S loses to C, loses to M, but wins versus D. And you'll notice D loses to everybody, except for P. If I did D right here, D versus C, loss, 1, loss, 2, loss, 3, loss, 4, 5, loss. So D versus C, it only wins 5 of them. So it loses there, and it loses to M as well as S. And those are your 5 voting methods that will be on your next test.